Hey there, this is Perch. Talking about the Fantastic Four. So, the Fantastic Four is an interesting comic because it reminds me a little bit when I've heard it talked about at conventions with other creators or editorial teams. There's two comics that always get described kind of in the same way. And when I mean this, when I say this, I mean described as hard, like hard stories to pitch, hard stories to get over, more of a struggle to write. And Fantastic Four always comes up as a book that's just, it's harder for people to wrap their heads around. People aren't sure what to do with it. They get stuck in the it's old fashioned and it doesn't really fit with kind of modern storytelling and what do we do with it. And the other one is Superman. Superman gets described often in a very similar light, like, the impossible character to write. You've got this character and what do you do with Superman? And I think that Fantastic Four, it's one of those cases where I find that editors and creators and people kind of approaching that property are overthinking it. I think they get stuck in kind of this mentality going in of what people have complained about with Fantastic Four, what some of the jokes are, and they don't get kind of it closes them down creatively. They don't think of all the ways it can go. And I think classic example, or you can go all the way back to Byrne and how he did Fantastic Four, which was felt fresh and relevant and everything else. I think you can look to some extent at the Ringo Wade kind of run. I think that was an interesting run, but probably not the best example of some of this stuff. I think there were fresh stories there, but it didn't have, it wasn't as high concept as other things. The other one to look at is Hickman's Fantastic Four run, where he did very unique things with kind of the family concept and big science and everything else. But I think there's easy pitches for Fantastic Four of how you can do it. I think you take it in many different directions, but I think a lot of the elements of a really great story are there. I think the problem is a lot of writers approach it and they feel like, okay, I've got to make sure I check my list. We got to have, Ben Grimm on Yancey Street getting a pie thrown at his face at some point, and we got to have some hijinks between the Torch and the Thing, and then we got to have Reed's too wrapped up in his work, and then we got to have Sue's kind of frustrated with that, and there's a little bit of tension. Reed's, Johnny's dating somebody wacky, and then how do we? There's this sense of I've got to go down the list and check off all the elements, and the answer is you don't. You don't have to do that at all. And the fact that it's a family book that you've got, a married couple, a brother and a buddy there in Ben, that this is the group. That shouldn't hold you back. That shouldn't, you look at The Incredibles, look at Black Science by Rick Remender. There's lots of look at the Terrifics over in at DC. There's ways you can kind of create this family team kind of dynamic and not get wrapped up in kind of repeating the same tropes over and over again. And for whatever reason, Fantastic Four goes there, and Superman often goes there. But this video is about Fantastic Four. I think that the hiatus after Hickman's run, after Secret Wars, was a good idea. I think it was good to kind of brush it off and kind of figure out this property and see how we were going to do it. The challenge is when it came back, it came back and it almost immediately felt stale. Within 6 issues, it felt stale again. And it's because the comic came back and it's like, oh, they're like, okay, I got to check those boxes again. Here's Reed, and he's tied up in this. And I don't know. And the new stuff that's getting played with is around Val and Franklin, the two kids. But even there, it doesn't feel fresh. And you're kind of hoping that we're going to get to fresh, that we're going to get to something kind of new and unique with these characters. But right now, it's like, it's checking the box of the family. And the great part about a long running series, about a comic that's been going on for a very long time, is that you've got a lot of history to draw from. And you have an audience that, many have been following along. Sure, you want to write as accessible, so you want to be able to introduce in new readers. You don't want to go so weird and so dense that you're going to force people into back issues to even understand what's going on. But that doesn't mean you have to constantly repeat yourself. An example of that now here I'll do something that people roll their eyes at, but take Harry Potter as an example. You had 6, 7 books in that series, and you will notice that that she would recap things in the beginning of the book, each book, for people coming in. She would, hey, remember this happened, this happened, this happened. And there was kind of a moment in the books, kind of toward the middle, where there was a lot of that. Like she just went on and on and on, recapping in the first couple chapters, and then she seemed to back off of it a bit. But by the time you got to chapter 2 or 3, it was rolling. And with Fantastic Four, there seems to be this, new writer comes in immediately. It's let's pick up the same old toys and play with them in the exact same way. And so you took this break so you could evolve the story, and then you didn't evolve the story. You might as well have just started publishing a Fantastic Four comic right away and not bothered. And I think that's kind of a shame. But there's a bunch of things I think about the new book that Slott's working on, where there's a co-writer helping now, and the artist bailed after a couple issues, and it's had some late problems, and there's aspects to the book that indicates it's a troubled book, at least in terms of kind of editorial thinking about it and putting some weight behind it. Unfortunately, I think we're headed to a place where the Fantastic Four will be picked up by Disney because, seemingly unlike Marvel, Disney does understand what to do with family properties and how to make them run. So I do think we'll see Fantastic Four kind of enter the MCU and be done in a big way. And at that point, I think they're going to want to relaunch Fantastic Four with a new number one and kind of, do this synergy with the movie. So maybe that writer will take a new approach, or maybe they relaunch it again with Dan Slott. I don't know, but that's kind of that's where it sits. And I don't know. Fantastic Four is a struggle for me because you can see clear examples in the run of writers who did it really, really well, who told new stories, who did interesting things and picked up the characters and had great plot and great momentum. And then you get other runs and other writers that just kind of give you the greatest hits, over and over and over. And that's why when Marvel said Fantastic Four is feeling a little stale, the weird part about that is they said that kind of toward the end of Hickman's run, which was when it was feeling probably the least stale it had felt in decades. But hey, whatever. I think that the key to a good Fantastic Four story is to leverage your strengths. You have a family, you have a tight community of explorers. You can put them in really dangerous situations. You can stress and test them in interesting ways. You can you can do really high concept sci-fi. You can have them be on planet, off planet, doing Kirby adventures or kind of down to earth stuff like Byrne did with She-Hulk when she was on the team. There's just a lot of different angles you can push with this story, and I think that's where Fantastic Four should go. And I'm confident there'll be a team on the book that will go there again someday. We just need to be patient, hang out, we'll get there. But that's the nature of Fantastic Four. Really interesting rogues gallery. I mean, if you look at it again, kind of backing up, they've got really defined heroes, a really deep continuity well to draw from. They've got a really, Batman level, well, not quite Batman, but a huge villains gallery. Just lots of different villains, lots of different, lots of different scenarios they can go into. In theory, with a creative-minded writer, I think Fantastic Four is one of the easiest titles to write because you can just have, crazy sci-fi adventures and go nuts with it. But that's my take. Maybe there's some invisible thing about Fantastic Four that is super difficult that nobody's been able to really articulate. I've been at shows and talked to different creative people and teams, and it is consensus that the Fantastic Four is just like the toughest book at Marvel to write. And when I probe on that, I'm never given a good reason other than it's old fashioned and people don't really like books with married people anymore, and it just these kinds of answers that don't really feel like thought out answers, just kind of I don't know. Maybe it's just me. Leave me a comment. What do you think? What would you do with Fantastic Four? You think that's a property that has a lot going for it, or am I wrong here? Is it one that is death to the creative team that touches it? Would love to know your thoughts. So leave me a comment, like, subscribe, notify, click the bell for notifications. Follow me on Twitter at Comic Perch. Thank you for listening.